The Metal Gear series is one of gaming's most notable and notorious franchises. Depending on how you look at it and what your tolerance for massive, winding story threads is, Metal Gear Solid can seem like anything from a hurricane of pretentious espionage nonsense to a nearly perfect stream of consciousness flowing straight from one of gaming's greatest creative minds. Most rational opinions are somewhere in between, but there's also no denying that most who have played all the way through a Metal Gear game are closer to the latter mentioned end of the spectrum than the former one. It's largely regarded as a fantastic series by most. As such, the series has spawned games across the generations of consoles from the original NES all the way to the 8th gen PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. And as is generally the case with franchises that run this long, Metal Gear has undergone some changes. Most notably with the original game in the Solid series for the PlayStation, and perhaps the most infamous entry in the series now, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain.
Not yet. The patient in the next bed saw my face. Of course, consider it done.
Metal Gear Solid 5 took perhaps the largest departure from what Metal Gear games have been known for ever, with its open-world gameplay, insanely vast array of possibilities for each mission, and most curious of them all, the way it shoved most of its story and context into the wings of the experience, instead of keeping them front and center, like previous games. Among these and other reasons, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain is one of the most memorable entries of the entire series. So let's take a moment and examine some of those reasons. Before we begin, please consider subscribing and enabling all notifications by clicking the bell icon. With that out of the way, let's get started. Right off the bat, the premise of Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain is a very different one than any other game in the series. Where every game in the entire series from the beginning had been somewhat linear, Metal Gear Solid 5 was full-on open world. Much to the delight of many gamers who were hoping for that sort of experience out of the series. Granted, most of the earlier Metal Gear Solid games did have plenty of explorability and often asked the player to return to previous areas, giving their games a bigger, more sprawling feel. But no game until The Phantom Pain had totally bought into the open world format in the more conventional way as it's understood by most. Given that change of format, Metal Gear Solid 5 had a lot of new doors open for its gameplay in terms of possible ways to approach various missions, resource gathering, and transportation options. Instead of running down a couple of possible paths to the mission's target or destination, in Metal Gear Solid 5, enemy encampments are designed much like how they would actually exist, using the terrain to their advantage and with multiple layers of defense. Guards, alarms, and surveillance are all things that take on a new layer of complexity when they're inserted into this far more open-ended world. Instead of there just being one or two different ways to dispatch various enemies or sneak past the surveillance cameras, those possibilities open up to near infinite, as there were 360 degrees of options around every obstacle. Included with this devotion to the open world format is also a very convincing and consequential day and night cycle, which of course both have their own pros and cons when it comes to your and your enemy's visibility. Metal Gear Solid 5 also throws in different weather scenarios that can make things harder on your enemies as well as yourself, as bad weather will make it easier for you to sneak around but also limit your ability to summon support drops. All of that mixed in with other more passive characteristics of the game like various guard shift changes, creating temporary weaknesses in their defenses. These things throw layer after layer of unpredictable complexity on top of everything else, bringing Metal Gear Solid 5 more than up to snuff when it comes to what open-world action game fans can expect from this experience. That same anything-goes approach is used when it comes to Metal Gear Solid 5's weapons and gear, all of the sorts of things that you would expect to see in a previous Metal Gear Solid game, as well as a handful of new things. Different types of pistols, assault rifles, shotguns, sniper rifles, shields, as well as throwable and placeable items like C4 and mines are all expectedly here and offer all of their own variants. Not to be outdone, of course, are the different approaches you can take with close quarters combat, as well as Snake's bionic arm that, depending on the situation, could yield better results than typical weapons anyway. But the game doesn't just supply you with so many different types of weapons and gear to use, it makes them all theoretically compatible with almost any situation. So it all just comes down to what your style is, balanced out with what you think any given situation might call for. Of course, Metal Gear Solid 5's new approach also opens a lot of doors in terms of ways you can screw up, get caught, and see your plans ruined. But that is more or less balanced out by Snake's ability to slow down time for a short moment and save himself from those consequences. And even when that doesn't work, Metal Gear Solid 5's flexibility and fluidity lets you seamlessly glide into new solutions that you hadn't considered before when you were executing your original plan. The game just has a way of always replacing dashed opportunities with new ones, and rewarding the player for responding in a dynamic way to the hands that they're dealt. As many old-school Metal Gear Solid fans will gladly remind you, Metal Gear Solid 5's story is not its strongest point. In fact, it may even be regarded as its weakest point, and what little story there is mostly hidden behind audio logs and transcripts that the player has to deliberately step away from the gameplay in order to experience. There's nothing inherently wrong with having a thinner story or putting the bulk of the story in other areas, but with this series, fans who have been with it for so long can't be blamed for feeling a little underwhelmed with the way they did it here. Especially considering that it all leads up to an ending that isn't nearly as bold or satisfying as the endings in pretty much all of the previous games. But just as the highlights of Metal Gear Solid 5's gameplay aren't really about completing the missions, the story of Metal Gear Solid 5 isn't really about the ending. Metal Gear Solid 5, in just about every way, is a game about the journey and not so much the destination. It's hard to blame longtime fans for not really wanting that out of the series at this point, but at the end of the day, there is nothing inherently wrong with approaching a story in this way. It's got good characters, interesting plot developments, and it doesn't totally subvert Metal Gear Solid lore in any horrible way. So while I understand the complaints about the story here, and I agree with most of them, I wouldn't get too hung up on it, considering how great so much of the rest of the game really is. Metal Gear Solid 5 is a flawed game, and in some ways, those flaws stick out like a sore thumb, but if you really open your heart to what it was able to accomplish with its fresh take on the series, there is a lot of fun to be had from this type of experience in the franchise. The differences between it and past iterations in the series might not make it for everyone, and that's okay, but at the same time, it's still definitely one hell of a game.
Plant your roots in me. I won't see you end as ashes. You're all diamonds.
We're not burying them at sea. What then?
We'll make diamonds from their ashes. Take them into battle with us.
A shining light to our brothers in arms, even in death.
We are diamond dogs.
That's all for now. If you enjoy what you saw, please hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, now is a great time to subscribe. We upload brand new videos every single day. After subscribing, don't forget to enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you next time, right here on GamingBolt.